I'm gonna be completely and utterly frank with y'all. Despite this franchise and this studio not needing to exist outside of being a reliable family movie producer, I don't hate the Despicable Me movies or Illumination nearly as much as some critics here on this glorious platform do. I don't think that necessarily means I think all of their movies are good. On the contrary, usually if an Illumination product isn't very liked, I usually don't like it either. Except for the Sing movies, I'll get to that. Like The Lorax, The Grinch, Hop. Usually if the general consensus is that it's not a good movie, I tend to agree. But on the other hand, I sometimes really enjoy the movies that aren't bad. The earlier Despicable Me movies, Migration, the Mario movie, and I want to say it, I like the Sing movies. Everyone says these movies are absolutely garbage, and I can't agree, especially the second one. These movies are so close to being cohesive and enjoyable stories from Illumination that I almost was reminded of the first Despicable Me movie. With that said, with my thoughts on the company itself out of the way, before I discuss the movie at hand, I want to discuss the Despicable Me franchise up to this point. But I am going to do a quick fire on it, because, I gotta actually get to the movie. The first movie is easily the best Illumination movie by a long shot. It's funny, it's got a good heart to it, the minions weren't quite annoying yet. I think this is what Illumination at first wanted to do, give genuine, I'm talking maybe A or B level DreamWorks writing and storytelling, but then they saw what made money and they kind of fell into that. And you can see that with Despicable Me 2, which isn't a bad movie in my opinion, but they definitely leaned more towards jokes and getting laughs more than telling a decent story. Minions, I think, is overhated. I don't think it's good, but the hate this movie got was ridiculous. I don't think it's fair to say this movie is that bad, because it's not. The jokes that work, and I think Sandra Bullock is one of the funniest villains in the franchise.
All these villains, and yet I still have the bear. Stuffed bear, why am I holding a bear?
And then there was Despicable Me 3, a film I totally get why it didn't work with audiences, because this was the film that really killed trying to tell a cohesive and comprehensive story. It's just nonstop whatever they can fit the minions into. Though this and Rise of Gru were the funniest in terms of the minions, that's for sure. While I'm on it, Rise of Gru possibly is the best one since the first film because it's the film that easily made me laugh the hardest. It's still majorly flawed and even introduces some plot holes. I do want to question how Gru and Vector are the same age in Rise of Gru, even though the first film has stated multiple times how Vector is younger and smarter than Gru. But I also don't think Illumination gave a flying fuck, so I'll move on. So where does Despicable Me 4 come in? It's painfully average. Like, there is very little to this movie. It's funny, but it's also incredibly unnecessary, and like the third film, it just feels like whatever we can fit the minions into will work. With that, since I'm aware this isn't a necessary film, I'm going to be nicer and give my thoughts on it as a whole instead of talking about what I wish the film was. So, here we go. Gru is back, and after a mission with the Anti-Villain League, an old rival of his, Maxime Le Mal, voiced by Will Ferrell, breaks out of prison and vows revenge on Gru and his family. That's plot number one. There's also them having to go into witness protection. Gru gets to know their neighbors in witness protection, and one of them is very preppy and kind of an asshole, voiced by Stephen Colbert. And they have a daughter who wants to be a villain like Gru was. All the while, the AVL makes a new breed of minions called the Easy Toy Marketing, I mean the Mega Minions. All the while, Gru tries to get along with his newborn son. Did he use his nose? I need to know, did he use his nose? I don't want it to seem like this movie doesn't have good stuff, because it does. For one, I don't think the minions ever really got annoying, in my opinion. They became more prominent by the second one, but in their defense, I don't think they really ever were annoying. Whenever they did get to that point, they usually had something really good, like in the third movie. I also think Gru is the funniest he's been since the second film. I do wish he had that family element he had in the first movie, but for the Gru he is nowadays, I think he works humor-wise. He's also voiced by Steve Carell, so he's easy to make funny. Maxime, despite not being a great villain, is pretty funny because it's just Will Ferrell doing this ridiculous French accent. Gru Jr. is both a huge cop-out plot device and yet a very funny addition to the franchise. When they're going on this heist at Gru's old villain school, they have to get past this laser field, and I love that while they're discussing how to get through it without triggering the alarm, Gru Jr. just goes through the door. Reminds me of playing Fallout 4 with Dogmeat as companion. You fluffy bastard! The ending of this movie is genuinely so ridiculous that only Despicable Me 4 could make it work. Also, I like the Mega Minions, there I said it. Poppy Prescott, I was worried it was gonna be like Zen from Kung Fu Panda 4. Come on, how easy would it have been for her to betray Gru and his family? But I do like that she's genuinely really funny, even voiced by Joey King. I'm glad they didn't go for that plot because, dear God, that's one of the biggest problems with Kung Fu Panda 4. That plot is really annoying. Okay, time for the bad stuff. This movie is genuinely so unfocused. I mentioned all of those plots, and yes, they do happen in the hour and 35-minute runtime. Such, while the main plot line doesn't really lose focus, there's also a lot of lost focus on subplots I liked. For being as prominent as they were in the advertising, the Mega Minions genuinely aren't in it very long. Like, of the runtime, maybe 10 minutes. They don't even defeat the villain, Gru does. Oh, and how about Lucy always wanting to be a hairdresser? only for her to get to her witness protection job as a hairdresser and ruin a lady's hair. But hey, that leads to a completely and utterly useless scene with the same lady chasing Lucy, Edith, and Agnes through the supermarket. And it never comes back. It would have been cool to have this lady expose their secret identities later in the film. But again, I really shouldn't expect that kind of writing from Despicable Me 4. Oh, and did I mention Gru wanting to get good with these neighbors? One of them was voiced by Stephen Colbert, and I got flashbacks to Monsters vs. Aliens. I think my overall issue is that while the main plot is fine, they don't really do much with the other elements that could have been really interesting. Margot has a tough time at school. That's great. Work with that. Oh no, she's just gonna mention it, and then we go back to Gru dealing with Gru Jr., who, by the way, hates Gru for no reason. Maxime has a girlfriend voiced by Sofia Vergara. And she only exists because Sofia Vergara has that accent everyone likes to hear. Trust me, they didn't make 11 seasons of Modern Family just because of Ty Burrell.
I get up at 6.
I get up at 5.
Seriously, I get up at 6.
That's you? I thought we had a raccoon.
But then she just kinda sits in the background while Maxime rambles about revenge on Gru and being evil. And I'm sorry, Will Ferrell with a French accent can only be so funny. Also, was it obvious that the Mega Minions is an obvious toy plot? Happy Meal's about to go crazy. This movie just doesn't have the focus at all. But I also argue neither did the other sequels or the Minion movies. So let's get to... Despicable Me 4 really doesn't need to exist. But because it does, I'd say it does its job pretty well, and that's about it. It does what Migration did. It knew how to be fun for the whole family and very little else. I expect stuff like Inside Out 2 to be good because Pixar has that track record and knows how to cater to both kids and adults. I expect movies like Kung Fu Panda 4 or The Wild Robot to be good, which by the way, I really hope Wild Robot is good, because DreamWorks has that track record of being able to cater to both kids and adults. These guys are the guys who made the Lorax. I don't expect the same thing I expect from Pixar or DreamWorks or even stuff like Sony Pictures Animation, and they made the fucking Emoji Movie. To expect a masterpiece out of Despicable Me 4 is just not fair. I really do like when Illumination is able to just go all out and make a decent film. But they do it so rarely, and that's why I just don't expect masterpieces from them. For what it is, I had fun, but don't expect much else. The minion who says, "What?" in the first film is voiced by Tamatoa. Good night.